All right, folks, welcome into another great episode of I've Got a Theory. I'm with my friend Jeff Klubeck, who's a professional coach, a veteran professor, and all-around great guy to play with, to hang out with, except he's a trash golf player.
That's true.
We'll just get that out there.
You may think I'm horrible, but that's true.
Yeah. No, I mean, I only say it because I know, because I'm the gauge, right? I'm bad. And if you're just as bad as me, we're both bad collectively.
Uh-huh.
So,
in my experience, two bads makes a good, right?
You know what the nice thing was is that
fun to get out there with you.
When we get to play, it's usually your ball goes errant, and then mine goes errant exactly where yours went. And so now we're playing cart path golf, or cart golf with my partner, and chasing balls for 6 to 8 strokes per hole, and that's how that goes down.
Well, thanks for the generosity with your calculations there, and it's there's got to be something magnetic about the whole thing. It's not just skill; it's got to be our magnetism.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've got a theory, and I want to get right to it. Tell me your theory.
Well, I've got a theory several, but the one that I'm interested in talking about is that women are superior, like, to men, and I'll stop there unless you have any questions. But like, there's a lot of gender conversation. It's not getting as much play lately after BLM and mailboxes and all of that. But the Me Too movement, is still recent to some degree, and gender conversations are happening. And I just want to get my theory out there that guys, we got to stop messing around.
Do you have evidence?
Women are superior, and the sooner we get that, the better.
Do you have evidence or anecdotes to back it up?
Well, I'll just say thank you. Yeah, I say the number one reason women, in my opinion, the number one, and by the way, this is my opinion, number one reason is they can reproduce inside of them, right?
Yes.
Like, okay, so they can do something. That's one thing that we will never be able to do. I have 3 beautiful kids, thank God. I'm blessed. My wife's amazing. And I'll never, ever, ever forget those moments where she's literally glowing and she's, what's going on? And she grabs your hand and says, hey, feel this. And it's like, wah, 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 wah. Time slows down right there. And I'm looking at her face and I'm seeing the wonder and the joy. I can't wait to feel something because I want to get close to what she's experiencing. She then says, did you feel that? And I'm like, no. So there's now another miracle happened while my hand is there. And then finally I feel something like, wait, I think I felt something. And it doesn't feel like what it felt like for her. So I'm like, now, first of all, I don't get the fun and the glory. Then secondly, what do I have? I have my work ethic, my commitment. I can't do anything until the baby comes out. But then once the baby comes out, then the attachment and the connection and the postpartum. And so now I'm playing catch up to trying to feel like I matter in this whole partnership deal of bringing. And ultimately you get your time and you parenting works itself out down the road. But bottom line is they can reproduce, we cannot, right?
But there's got to be more criteria for you to make a bold statement like just women are patently superior to men.
Well, I think that you now it gets into humor. Right, like, because here's what now it gets into comedy, I think, because like, all right, they're superior because they can reproduce, we cannot. Now we're tripping over ourselves trying to make up for it, and we get in, and then now they're amazing because they deal with us tripping over ourselves, right? And they can still do on and it just goes from there. So I'd like to say behind every good man is a surprised woman. And
what's she surprised by?
It's just easier to be self-deprecating. There's a communication style, like the people that make fun of themselves first disarm others from doing it. So I'd rather make fun of myself as a man and talk about my limitations than have anybody else make fun of my limitations. It's just a defense mechanism.
For
right?
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But
so there's a lot more to this, because there's different angles, and what do you think the implications are of a statement like that? One, and two, a more ubiquitous understanding that maybe an acceptance that women are superior.
Well, think about leadership. Think about glass ceilings. Like there's immediately. You think. We hear a lot about institutional racism, but there's institutional sexism, right? There's tons of opportunities, and maybe it's nobody's fault. let's say, right? Um, I remember when I was growing up, I'm 48 years old. When I was growing up, roles were more, quote, traditional. Not that I ever believed that anybody couldn't be anything they wanted to be. As we were still raised with, hey, anybody could do anything. But I don't know if my parents were raised that way or their parents were raised that way.
True.
So,
It was probably less so the older you get, right? It's more prevalent
mhm.
nowadays.
Yeah. So it's not impossible. There were still, amazing women that did amazing things, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. So when you talk about, like, I don't know how it got normalized, that men would go to work and make the money and women would stay home and, but we know that's not true. Like, I look at my wife, just my wife, for example. Maybe I'm, I don't know if I'm jinxed or tainted or blessed or biased, of course, but my wife, she's corporate. So she pulls down the benefits, the stable salary, and she flies all over the world doing amazing stuff. And she's risen the corporate ladder and amazing. But at the same time, she's involved in the PTA, and she's involved in Little League Baseball as the treasurer, and she's making meals from scratch at home. And we got the dogs and managing the calendar. And like, I traveled the world doing what I was doing, and she just handles everything effortlessly. And like, it's just I marvel at what I would never underestimate, a healthy-minded woman or a healthy-minded person, period, never estimate. But I just think that, like, I have fun with the theory, right? Because all of the comedy and all of the jokes and the gender stuff. But in all seriousness, my personal story is I'm not sure if I'd be as fortunate as I am without Marianne in my life. I'm grateful for all the things that she does. And I'm in literal awe of everything she accomplishes, everything she's aware of, and the effortlessness with which she does it all, and a grace. And I admire it. I sometimes think, I don't know if I could do that. And I certainly can't pop the kids out the way she can. But there's all these other amazing things she does that I admire, that I benefit from, that I don't see myself doing. So that's just my own personal story.
So that might be a stress type thing. And going into it, just thinking of the history of society and how we've gotten to where we're at, you could see why men have taken a prominent role in most of society, politics, governance, business, because we have this division of labor, and women were expected to be at home, to take care of the kids, to take care of the household, and men didn't have to do things like deliver babies or breastfeed or things like that were
Nurture.
in the domain of women. And we were out having to fight wars and generate business or hunt an animal or do the farming. You're seeing, and nowadays that's becoming a lot more equalized, and we're seeing a lot more women break gender roles, right? Even most recently with the nomination of Kamala Harris as the Democratic vice presidential nominee.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's a really good chance that not only a woman, but an African/Indian woman could become a vice president. And then potentially, if it goes right, maybe one day she becomes president, right? It's not too uncommon for vice presidents to become presidents.
Yeah, well, if that happens for Biden, it can happen for anybody else. True. I think that the thing is, it's like we human beings, we were given the fight or flight response, right? So that we could run away from dinosaurs, you know what I mean, or crush a spider, right? Or do you know what I mean? Like, before there was language, the survival mechanism, right? But now we don't have to run from dinosaurs as much. So the fight or flight response has transferred into ego defense, and people, the outrage culture now. Anything different than me, it's a reason for me to be outraged, and I attack or ignore anything different from me, right? So we see emotional fight or flight, etc. So same thing, these traditional roles, women can reproduce, men can't. So it's a natural division of labor, but we don't have to hunt and gather the way that we used to, right? And we don't have to, fight wars as civilians. We don't have to fight wars the way anybody in a tribe may have had to, known how to defend itself, right? So now, where does that transfer? Part of my theory is that there is a strong, like the strongest. Let me put it this way: women are superior, if I put it this way, because the strongest thing on the planet they possess is the ability to reproduce, which in one sense could be a meaning of life. What's the meaning of life? Reproduction. Okay, so
I'll give you that.
Big. That's big, right? Now let's add to that conversation, though. Well, what is the strongest, the greatest thing on a planet that a man possesses? And to that, I would say it's our commitment / work ethic. If we're committed to something and we attach our work ethic to that, that's the strongest thing. But like including our, love, our capacity to love. Like bros, right? Bros have friendships that a lot of women, you hear about women being catty and etc. A lot of successful girls' night outs groups and women's groups and so forth. But you hear a lot about women having a hard time being friends, women being competitive, women, etc. Some superficial things that plague women in women's issues in friendships where bros don't have that necessarily, right? Well, like when bros love each other, when bros are committed, like bros committed to their poker games or committed to their golf outings, or like bros, like there's a camaraderie, a brotherhood. There's power in that. But then outside of social, right, to make buildings, to hunt animals, to wage wars, to etc. But nowadays, women can be engineers, contractors. Women can be in the military. So I don't.
Or even president of the United States.
Yeah, I don't see the need for gender to determine those roles anymore. That's obvious. So I if anybody's having confusion about why women are doing this or why doing that, like let me just try to get right to the front of the line and say because they're superior. Now, like let's just say it, right? And now let's have any other conversation about gender after we just go ahead and recognize that piece. They can reproduce. They carry in them the ability to manifest the meaning of life, if there ever was one, which is reproduction, right? If not reproduction, timing, and we can get into theories of meanings of life. But I just think it was interesting. I'm lucky. I met my wife when I was 19. She was 18. We fell in love right away. We were like codependent early on, and there was a while when we were apart for 15 months before we got back together to live happily ever after. And that's like when I started coming up with this notion that when two people are dating, right? When two people are dating, there's the gaming and the walling, right? People are in the game, playing the game because they want companionship, but they're putting up walls because nobody wants to get hurt. Anybody that's over 21, 22, 23 years old, they've been hurt before in some relationship. So if you're single now, you got to play the game if you ever want to be with somebody again, but you're playing the game having put up walls, so gaming and walling. Well, when those walls come down, what breaks the walls down? Well, the strongest thing a woman has is reproduction. So if they have mature adult time, women's giving up the greatest power before a man has to give up what? His greatest power is commitment. So when mature adult time takes place before there's true commitment, boy, are women at a huge disadvantage, etc. So I was thinking about these things way back in my 20s when I was in graduate school for those 15 months that I wasn't with Marianne, but I got my
let's kind of dive into that commitment aspect. You mentioned that men, our biggest power is commitment. But I would say that many men fail at that, right?
Yeah, it's the greatest power. Absolutely, I agree with you. It's many women, no offense, I don't know if fail is the right word, but many women fail at reproduction, right? So it just, like, in other words,
I would say a lower percentage, right? Maybe 5 or 10% of women can't reproduce.
There they are. Again,
versus 50+% of men will probably fail at commitment.
Well, therein lies, right? They're set up for They're set up for success, women, whereas we're not. I digress. I agree with you 100%. My ability to commit says nothing in my success rate at it. Does that make sense?
It sounds like what you're saying is that you're able to latch onto a really good woman, and you owe everything to her, and your commitment is being confused with, I need this lady.
Well, no, I'm committed. Commitment's commitment. Commitment. Like the ring, it goes around. It's not kind of, or it's, I'm not sort of committed, not kind of committed. We weren't kind of pregnant. There's some things that are kind of absolute. It's not healthy to think in absolutes, but to recognize the objective realities. And that's the thing. In today's day and age, people have second, third, fourth marriages, and that's normalized now. And that was taboo. When I was growing up, divorce was like, oh my God, it was almost like disease. If you heard about somebody getting a divorce. Right?
Larry King Live has been married 9 times, twice to the same lady.
Well, It's just it's a contract, right? It's an independent contract agreement, I guess.
Why does he
So
want to keep giving away so much of his money? That's the crazy thing.
I don't know. We don't know what the nups are and the prenups and
Of course, of course.
the arrangements are. God bless. Love is love, right? However people want to do it. I got lucky, man, for sure. I wake up every day and I figure out how I'm going to deserve my wife and kids. I'm a fortunate dude. That is for sure.
So,
And
so what can we take from this lesson?
Yeah.
So, what if we have a viewer or a listener that's saying, "Yep, I agree," or "I disagree"? What's the takeaway from this? What can we? Is there a lesson that we can learn from your theory that women are superior?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to be that bold as to say that I've got lessons to teach anybody. But if it wasn't a lesson, let's say it was let's say there's 360 degrees in a circle, right? So that means, let's say there's 360 doors, points of entry into a conversation, if you will. And I just, I just want this notion that women are superior to be one point of entry into this conversation about gender and division of labor and gender relations and successful marriages and masculine, feminine energy. And, there's movements in equality, etc. We see it, whether it's not just sexism, but racism, etc. A lot of the old stuff, there's still remnants of it. There's still issues in society.
So that's exactly right, and I think that's the key takeaway. It is to put down your guard, is to respect a person based on their intellect, ideas, work, commitment, ethic, as opposed to their gender or their skin color or their ethnicity. My wife just told me that same story, that she works at a big healthcare provider here, and she said that when she has feedback for management or executive management, it's really annoying to talk to them because they are mostly white and or Asian and or Indian men that run these medical groups, and so when she pipes up as a small blonde woman, she knows instantly they're like disregarding her opinion as someone that must not be as credible because she looks like she's a woman and she looks like she does, and so they can't find her as credible as someone that's potentially isn't a woman, or
they may not know that they're doing it. That's not just a gender issue. Sometimes it's the curse of knowledge. Like, sometimes people that rise to levels of success have every reason to believe that they're right.
Right.
So Marshall Goldsmith wrote a great book called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." So it's not just gender or race or whatever, but it's any level of success will trick the successful person into thinking that they're always right, which then there's an increased instance of not listening to others the more successful people get, which is a path to loneliness where big executive coaches need to come in and do 360 assessments, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad that you realize that, because there's pros and cons to that, right? There are the constructs that have got a person to their success isn't necessarily going to get them to the next level. And they might not realize the constructs that they're building or the kind of walls that they're building to be discriminatory inadvertently based on their prior experience.
Yeah. Have you ever been to a Toastmasters?
I have, and I understand the basis of it.
Okay. Well, there's an Awk Counter in any Toastmasters group. It's somebody that sits there with the clicker, and they sit in the back of the room when people are speaking. If they have, there's a whole list of them. If there's an ah, a but,
like,
an
what,
an and so, an a tongue click or a throat clear, or a,
of course.
Like, and it's not until you hear the clicker going off that you have any idea whatsoever that you're doing any of those things. And it would be really interesting in a situation like your wife's to sit there with a clicker every time that she's interrupted or overtalked, or her idea was ignored and then turned around a little bit later and then recast as somebody else's, or any of these things that happen systematically, right? That people don't know that they're doing it. But if you had the clicker click, you just did an instance of blame. Oh, I did? I didn't realize it. I know you didn't, right?
Well, what's interesting is that she finds that the same thing happens in groups of women too.
Oh yeah.
So
that's alpha, and that's a whole other set of reasons for it. In that situation, you got alpha, right? You got intense, goal-oriented behavioral styles versus passive, analytical behavioral styles. And then I think the degree to which people feel secure in their own skin, the less of a need to project and dominate an opinion or the thoughts of a group. I will tell you this. I came up with a Klubeck snack. Are you ready for this?
Okay.
I call them Klubeck snacks. It's either my wife's homemade cookies, right? or something memorable that I say that's worth writing down or that might be sticky.
Got
And
it.
it is this. Are you ready?
Yep.
When there's two alphas in the room, this is just my opinion, Klube snack. When there's two alphas in the room, the smarter alpha will usually defer to the dumber alpha.
Is that because they're being smarter about it and they just don't want to have conflict? What do you think?
Well, I just think it's like, like if I'm an alpha, I recognize I like to run the show. I like to, lead the thoughts. I like to have the jokes. I like to puppeteer the situation. I like some attention. I like to make people laugh. I like things to go my way if I'm alpha. And I recognize that anybody else has similar energy. I will quickly let them do their thing. Right? Like if I'm the only one, I'll risk whatever people think about me in order to, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's not a hard science, but it's like, sometimes you want to give other people enough rope for them to hang themselves, right?
Yeah. And does it happen that way necessarily, or
No,
because it sounds like
no. But because sometimes you lead by example, the other alpha catches the vibe, and you know what I'm saying. Like, but it comes back to me leading with women are superior. If I'm in the conversation on gender at all, I'd rather lead with an ability to put the other person ahead of me and to put myself in a position of deference and listening. I'd rather approach the conversation, putting somebody else on the pedestal, even their perspective or their whims or their wishes, and coming at it that way and then working my way up to wherever it goes, than being on the defensive. No, it's got to be my way, or no, men are superior, or, you know what I'm saying? I don't want, like, it's just I like to approach it with diplomacy and open-mindedness and a critical thought to lead with. So rather than avoiding critical thinking and being triggered into ego defense myself because I'm a man or because I'm an alpha or what have you, right? I'd rather defer to the other alpha and be invited into the situation and then let it fly, or defer to the woman and then be invited into a situation. I'd like to be considered harmless in all discourse, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you can be a conduit for a further breakthroughs, that's kind of the goal that
Yeah.
you would have, right, in your roles, in any role, right? As previously as a professor, currently as a coach in a business and a success coach, you're really just asking the right questions.
Yeah, questions are our best friend, man. That is for sure. I'm always a fan of replacing statements with questions.
Yeah, because you can get to the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's better when you can get your audience or the person you're speaking with to come to that conclusion instead of you giving it to them.
Yeah, attention. Well, the questions are attention gating, right? And a brain can't hear a question without trying to answer it.
Interesting. Yeah.
So they're a great way to grab attention, and then they're a great intervention tool. When people are running story, when people are, running their pattern, when people are behaving, quote, predictably, and you need to interrupt, the question is a great mechanism, a great tool. I mean, it's just such a great communication instrument, questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can really further the goals, depending what your goal is, right? I mean, you could work backwards from your goal and get there just by asking questions.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's do you want to come up with as well? I'll tell you what. This is interesting. I think I told you. I wrote a book. I self-published this book called Get a Clue in 52, and it's got 5 sections. And the sections are networking, sales, marketing, communication, and accountability. And here's tip number 4 in communication is ask questions.
Yeah.
So we did tip number 1 2 nights ago, Sunday night. So tip number 4 is going to be 2.5 weeks from now. Maybe you'll be a guest with me on that episode and come on live and live stream with me, and we'll talk about the art of asking questions and examples of great questions to ask, and that would be fun. That would be a fun.
Jeff, have you ever done an improv comedy class?
No, I have not.
Oh, I know you must have taken Toastmasters because you speak well.
Yeah.
And, taking an improv comedy class, I've done it. I've recommended it to a lot of different people, and it teaches you different strategies, very similar to Toastmasters, but are a lot more fun, that keep the conversation moving, that make you agreeable, and typically do it in different types of games. Prime example is, you've seen Whose Line Is It Anyway, right?
Uh-huh.
And that show, and they're up there and they're geniuses at comedy and improv comedy on the spot. But there would be games where you play where you're in a group and all you can do is ask questions. And as soon as you stop asking a question, if you answer that question, you're out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole purpose of the game is just to keep asking questions.
Well, people think, oh, that's easy. I'll just ask a question, but it's not because of how. Yeah.
Yeah, and usually it has pretty funny consequences because you're going to get someone to fumble it up and want to answer your question instead of.
Oh wow! Look at this.
We got a guest.
Yeah, we have a guest. That's kind of fun. This is Kate. She's coming on the line. I guess I must not have checked my calendar, or maybe she's coming on early.
You want me to pause the recording?
Yeah, you can. Why? Might as well. Well, I am.
Okay, so yeah, we were just talking about asking questions in improv. I mean, if you get a chance, I recommend it to anyone. I can't think of anyone I wouldn't recommend taking an improv comedy class. I don't know when they're doing it again, but they have it at down in Mission Hills, right next to Shakespeare's. They have a improv comedy club there, and they would do classes, and they have like level 1, level 2, level 3. And I did level 1. I remember doing it with a friend, and it was the only class I'd ever taken in my life where for 2 hours every week, I would just laugh my ass off.
Yeah.
At other people's jokes, at our own creativity, just getting up there and having fun. And I didn't do it to be a comedian. I did it so I could improve my public speaking and not be uncomfortable being on stage. And not that I'm on stage a lot, but I do get called in for speaking engagements and things like that. And I want to be able to be comfortable up there. And I rarely come up and try to tell jokes because that's a lot of pressure. But at least I try to deliver some good content when possible.
Yeah, most of the time the trick to public speaking is just to be yourself. And people get so caught up with not making mistakes that they forget to just be themselves.
Right.
But the other thing, I got tons of tips when it comes to public speaking. You mentioned I'm a retired adjunct professor. I taught public speaking for 20 years. And humor was what I used to get people past their fear. Now, not that I took classes on humor, but I was gifted with the timing and the comedy, and grew up watching cable television and all the greats like Robin Williams and Billy Crystal and Richard Pryor and all of them. So really enjoying all of that.
Interesting you didn't mention any women.
Well, the comedians, God, who are the female comedians growing up? There was they wouldn't have their own specials when I was growing up. They would be spot comedians in like a lineup of comedians. But like you would see Ellen Jenner coming when I was growing up, and she didn't have her own show, or Paula Poundstone, or Roseanne Barr. She was making a big name of herself in the '80s when we were growing up, and she was off the stages already and into sitcoms, etc. But I haven't. I stopped following stand-up comedy after high school. Really, once I got into college, I didn't pay attention to it much anymore. I think it's a lot of. I guess there's some good artists out there these days, but it seemed to me that the older I got, the more turned off I was by just all of it seemed like needless, like it's all stereotypes and cussing and sex references.
Comedians are the worst. I mean, comedians are the worst people on the planet. I've spent time with them, and they have low self-esteem. They like to attack other comedians. They hate when another comedian has a joke. I was just spent too much time
in a cute kind of way. I
don't think so. It's extremely.
It's real.
It's extremely malicious. Like they're going for the jugular when conversing with other comedians about comedians, and maybe at a certain level. Maybe at a certain level, when you've reached it, you're okay with it. You can make jokes and be a little bit more harmless. But at the semi-pro and down level, like. Comedians seem to hate other comedians. I've noticed this. If you ever hang out in a comedy club and hang out with a comedian like before or after their show, like they're just upset that other comedians have jokes that are funny. One of my favorite female comedians is Wanda Sykes, which people forget about, but she is off the wall hilarious. But you're right, for the most part, men get a lot of the attention, and I think it vibes differently, right? I know that women like women comedians, but women like also male comedians. But I feel like a lot of men prefer male comedians and less so the women, right? I mean, it's a very distinguished.
I think Sirius XM, like I recently got a free subscription in the new car that I leased, and so the comedy channels, I think they do a really good job featuring the women comedians on the satellite comedy.
That's true.
Stations.
Yeah.
But Kevin Hart has his own station. I don't know if a woman comedian has her own station. Still, so you can still see an inequality. But I like listening to the female comedians. I would agree with what you said before, that maybe by the numbers, men listeners would prefer men comedians or whatever. Maybe that's true. But I like listening to female comedians the same way I liked watching Friends and Ally McBeal.
Interesting. Yeah.
I wanted to know what the women were being told.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn. You know what I mean?
But there's super fundamental differences, and I'll mention it like this. You know, I like cars, and I like car shows. Like I watch Top Gears and the things like that, and even just a boring review with one of these boring YouTubers that reviews cars. Sometimes I'll just watch them, right? Just because I love cars. And my wife likes watching fashion shows and shows about dresses and stuff like that, and runway models. And she's like, you know, she'll always be like, "Oh my God, you know, isn't that dress so beautiful?" Da, da, da. I was like, I don't know. It looks like a dress to me. I can't tell. And right then a light bulb went off in her head. She's like, dresses to you is like cars to me, is what she said. She's like, I see when you talk about cars, they all look the same to me. In the same way you look at dresses and fashion, and that all looks the same to you. And I was like, well, that's a very fundamental difference, huh?
Yeah. I mean, therein lies the essence of, you know, advertising. You know, one of the things we talked about in marketing is understand, you know, the where, you know, the destination. Where is your target going to be? You know, and what channels can you take to get there, and what channels are they taking on the way to the where that they're going, and are those places to get your messages out there? When we were talking about marketing, but like, you know, again, if you want to get to, I think about advertisers, they're going to advertise on different programs to get to those eyeballs. You know, right? So, you know, program, and that's the media. The job is really just to deliver our advertisers to eyeballs. That's the job of all media and all programming. And so it's very interesting when people learn the fundamental differences between what people want and then how to get the messages to them. You know, there's so many thoughts around all of that. So then it gets back to the gender conversation, individuality within the union. You know, how do two people with such fundamental differences in what they're interested in, you know, coexist, celebrate their independence, give each other space within the union to be themselves and have their interests, versus, hey, when do you want to come and be interested in what I'm in? Or, hey, can I come and be interested in what you're interested in? And how's the room for both of those things? And no, you have your own space and I have my own space. And, you know, the individuality within the union. And I think all of that's fascinating.
It's true. And you make a compelling point, because I can admit that I'm guilty of this, and I should beg for forgiveness, is that I don't support my wife and her endeavors professionally or personally nearly as much as she supports mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty of that. And I've come to that realization. I'm not going to cry on air, but I'm going to have that conversation with her and tell her that I respect her and that I support her, and I'm going to do a better job of it. But at least, you know, having this conversation with you has made me recognize that I should be more supportive of that.
Let's sprinkle some bonus. Instead of stating that you're going to do a better job of it,
just do it.
Ask the question. Hey, babe, if I were to do a better job, what would that look like?
Yeah, like that.
You know, like if I could do better, how would that show up? Would it be me, you know, asking you after a great day how you've done, or, you know, cheering you on before you get to your day, or checking in with you? What does it look like? Me being more supportive, what does that look like? And then you get the answer, and then you don't have to play a guessing game.
Boom. That's all. That was all worth it right there. So hopefully listeners have tuned until the end, because that's going to be the Pearl Klubeck snack that I'm going to keep. That's the Klubeck snack I'm going to take, is to ask my wife how it would look if I was more supportive for her.
Yeah, beautiful. Isn't that wonderful?
I like that.
And that's why I'll say this again. You mentioned some people out there go for the jugular, but this is Coach Klubeck. I go for the hugular. All right. I can't wait for this COVID shit to end so we can get back to the real loving and get back to hugging and making the world go around with the good stuff.
Bro, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for spending some time with me. That was a lot of fun. Appreciate you guys listening into another episode of I've Got a Theory. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Jeff, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Henish. I love you, man.
Love you, bro.
All right.